Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the Russian Ukrainian war. We are now in day 19 of this continued conflict, and it continues again unabated. As you can see, I'm using the map again from the other day, but again, not a lot has changed in this ongoing conflict, and we'll talk about some things that are happening in the country, meaning Ukraine, as the Russians and the Ukrainians continue to fight. But now we're starting to hear here in the United States that good old Lindsey Graham is now starting to think that a no-fly zone over Ukraine may be reasonable. So I got to tell you, I look at Lindsey Graham like the Nancy Pelosi of the Republican Party. I don't think he's that bright. I mean, obviously he's book smart. He was able to get a law degree, and he spent a few years in the Air Force National Guard in the Judge Advocate's office. But again, outside of that, he's never really been in the military. I mean, you can say that being in the Air National Guard as an attorney would give you that right to call yourself a member of the United States Armed Forces. But I'm not going to give him that. I'm just not going to do it because I don't see it. And especially now that good old Lindsey Graham quite possibly could be advocating to send American sons and daughters to fly over Ukraine at the risk of getting shot down by S-400 and S-300 missiles, I think is pretty deplorable. And again, I don't understand where he is coming from on this. Obviously, he has some motivations that are leading him to say these sorts of things, and quite possibly some of those are some external pressure, I would say. But again, a no-fly zone over Ukraine means war with the Russian Federation. So you have to prepare yourself for that, and that's kind of where he is right now, at least, looking to at some point lead the country. And I don't know how the people of South Carolina elected this guy for decades and decades, and it's just this typical political class that gets into power and stays there in perpetuity. And the guy clearly is, I mean, he's never been married. He doesn't have kids. I mean, just a really, really strange dude. And again, how he stays in that position in South Carolina is beyond me. And then now with the whole decision-making process in terms of this no-fly zone over Ukraine, it's just really just asinine, and just really shows you the condition of the body politic inside of the United States. We have just some incredibly stupid leaders that are running the country right now, and it concerns me greatly, obviously, because I'm talking about it. But back to the ongoing conflict, we're hearing now that the Russians may have, in fact, asked the Chinese for assistance, for actual military assistance. So what would that look like? What could the Russians could possibly be asking in terms of military assistance from the Chinese? Well, I think what they're looking to obtain is some of the drones that the Chinese operate. See, the Chinese have not followed the same Russian doctrine in terms of limiting itself. And the Russians have done a really, really poor job in a couple of categories that have clearly really hampered their continued operations over Ukraine in this modern battlefield. One of those is drones. The Russians have not invested enough money in drones, but more specifically, both in optronics and targeting pods as well. If the Russians were using targeting pods and using the same sort of air doctrine that the United States uses and a lot of Western nations also use, it would probably be in a much better position in terms of maintaining the safety of its pilots and having the ability to accurately strike targets, military targets, that the Russian military can observe. And it's having very great difficulty right now outside the use of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, which have been fairly accurate and effective. But again, not having those both those drone assets and again those multi-role fighter bombers that have that standoff ability with those really high-end targeting pods is really showing a gap in Russian ability right now. And I think that could be one area where the Chinese could in fact help the Russians. I think it may be a little bit difficult to retrofit some of those Chinese targeting pods on some of the Russian Su-30, Su-34s, Su-35s. I think it's possible, but again, I think that's one area where possibly the Chinese could be of help. Obviously, the Russians are not manufacturing those targeting pods in a rate that would actually help them on the battlefield. They very rarely use them. The only thing in terms of a targeting pod that the Russians do use is a narrow view system that is installed on the Su-34, and again doesn't have the same type of resolution or standoff ability that you would see in even some Chinese systems or obviously the Lightning, the Sniper types of systems the United States uses. But I do think the Chinese could assist the Russians in terms of both providing drones, and a lot of drones probably really fast, and obviously some of those precision-guided weapon systems that could be mounted on those drones. I mean, we've seen video evidence of Russian-made drones, and again, you can clearly see that the optronic system on those drones are not very stable. They don't have very good clarity, and again, they're just a couple of generations behind Western drone manufacturing capability, and you can clearly see that, and it's hampering the Russian operations right now. Obviously, the Russians do have drones, but not the same quality, especially strike package drones, i.e., the types that are being used by the West, be it the Predator or Reaper or the smaller TB2 from Turkey. That has proved very, very effective. Now, we could, again, possibly see the Chinese start to deliver and the Russians start to utilize those CH-4, those Wing Loon type drones that could help them in this conflict. Because, again, the Ukrainian air defense system is very, very much active, and it is being helped by those United States E-3 Sentries, those long-range airborne radar systems that can detect when Russian aircraft have entered the airspace of Ukraine. And again, the Ukrainians don't even have to turn on their long-range radars. They get this information from U.S. sources, and then they can then engage those aircraft with their S-300s and Buks and medium and long-range air defense systems. But that could be something that could be very interesting to watch here if, in fact, the Chinese do start supporting the Russians. Another area I think the Russians are really having issues, and that's a lot of their equipment. If you look at their tanks, their main battle tanks, the T-72B3s, few T-90s, T-80 upgrades, T-80Us. Again, the Russians are using equipment that is really fundamentally it's from the early 70s, late 60s in design, coming from the T-64, and then progressing to the T-72, and then they've upgraded those systems. But unfortunately for the Russians and even the Ukrainians that continue to use those Russian vehicles, they're lighter vehicles. They don't have as much armor as Western main battle tanks. And again, I've of course had the opportunity to play with some T-72, so to speak, and I can tell you, after obviously operating on M1 A1s and Bradleys, Western vehicles are just much better vehicles. They're roomier, and again, I wouldn't, as a former member of the U.S. military and heavy armor units, would absolutely be terrified to be in a T-72. Quite frankly, from the experience that I've had with them. And again, I think we can kind of see that lineage now continuing to take place within the confines of this conflict. The Russian armored vehicles are just, I think they're just too small and just not armored enough to survive the modern battlefield. And I think we're seeing that within the context of this conflict. We're seeing abandoned vehicles that the Russians leave on the battlefield. Now, maybe they did run into some technical difficulties and decide to leave the vehicle. But I do think, from at least the video footage that I'm seeing of the conflict, that the survivability of some of these vehicles obviously has to be questioned. And it's nothing new. I mean, we've seen it from since the Arab-Israeli wars to the 1991 First Gulf War. We've seen it in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, and we've seen it in Chechnya, and we've seen it now. Kind of the same MO in terms of what happens to these vehicles on the modern battlefield. And yes, Western tanks do get destroyed. They do get mission killed, and yeah, they do get destroyed, and their crews get killed too. But I don't believe you see the same sort of catastrophic failures in terms of the equipment that you inherently see from some of these Russian designed vehicles. And again, they've not really. They haven't really taken that leap past the T-72 or the BMP-2 or the BMP-1 or the BMP-3. It's really the same soup but a different bowl. They try to upgrade them. They do the best they can, I think, in terms of the economics of the situation. But I think they were heading down the right path with some of these newer vehicles, the T-14, T-15, Boomerang, what have you. And I think you were starting to see the Russians, the light bulb come on, and you were starting to see that the Russians were coming to the understanding that they needed to have bigger vehicles and better protected vehicles with active protection systems. And unfortunately for the Russians, they haven't really been able to make good on those developmental vehicles that they've deployed. And again, they're kind of using the same sort of army that they would have used in a lot of cases in the mid 80s. And unfortunately for the Russians, they're fighting in some cases some very, very advanced systems that have gone well above and beyond the protection level of what those vehicles could have withstand from systems that they would have faced in the 80s. And now with the Javelin and other systems they're now seeing, it's really hurting the Russians, and you can clearly see that on the battlefield as well. And obviously that should be a great concern for the Russians, and I think really that is the crux of the issue right now. And obviously, we've heard about logistics issues, and I got to tell you, logistics are obviously incredibly important. Omar Bradley, what do you say? Strategy is for amateurs, and logistics are for professionals. And that was one clear advantage during World War II that the United States came very, very prepared with, and that was having that logistical ability to sustain a force in the field. And if you're not able to do that, and you're going to inherently run into problems, and I think that's being obviously magnified by some of the equipment that the Russians are still using in its force construct in this ongoing conflict. And again, it's something that the Ukrainians have as well, because the Ukrainians are still using a lot of that same type of equipment that the Russians are also using as well. I know the Russians obviously have put some more advanced forward-looking infrared thermal imaging sights in their vehicles, but again, that's all fine and good, but it hasn't really increased those vehicles' ability to sustain hits and have situational awareness in terms of the battlescape around them, and it's really taken a toll. But right now, again, the Russians at this point, again, are really kind of stalled around major cities such as Kiev, Kharkiv, and in the south as well. And right now, we continue to hear that the Russians are making every attempt to encircle these cities and besiege them, and then try to reduce opposing forces through the use of artillery and tactical aircraft, which they are doing, and they may indeed prove successful at the end of the day and come out victorious. But again, that's not guaranteed at this point. Again, the Ukrainians are still actively fighting and actively engaging and being very, very tenacious against the Russians. But at the same time, the Russians continue to cause casualties on the Ukrainians as well, especially with those ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and obviously their tactical aircraft are still in the air when they can, attacking Ukrainian targets. I do think the Russians are deploying some of their better helicopters, and some of those are proving to be reasonably effective, especially the copters the attack helicopters they have with thermal imaging optics, such as the Ka-52 or versions of the Ka-52 and the Mi-28 and some variants of the Mi-24 Hind as well. And we're seeing those being put to good use by the Russians, but at the same time we're still seeing them getting shot down by the Ukrainian military, who's being very, very well equipped and was very well equipped with surface-to-air missile assets that can take down these sorts of aircraft. And again, that is kind of where we're at right now in terms of what right now, for at least the viewer outside looking in, is fundamentally a stalled conflict right now. And again, I've talked about before that the Russians are going to have to achieve some sort of momentum swing and regain initiative. And I do believe that the Ukrainians are taking casualties. The Russians are wearing down the Ukrainians. But it's going to take some time before the Russians are fully, if the Russians, in fact, do become fully victorious in this conflict. Because again, by just looking at this map, now this map may not be completely accurate, and I would wager that there are obviously areas the Russians control that are not marked on this map. But at the same time, the Ukrainians still control a significant amount of the country and are resisting to their best efforts. And again, we've kind of seen the same thing for for several days now in terms of where we're at within the confines of this conflict. I would say, again, keep an eye on the possibility that it could expand. It would not surprise me at a certain point, especially when we have idiots like Lindsey Graham talking about no-fly zones and all sorts of other just really asinine ideas that really would probably do more harm than good in terms of conflict outcomes. But that's where we sit right now. We'll continue to monitor the situation and report with additional news and conversations very, very soon. Have a good day, everybody.